welcome to this session, which is upskilling the jilted generation, the employability debate. Now today, of just over 7 million young people under 24, 1.5 million are either not in jobs or in full-time education. So clearly, something isn't quite right when you've got 1.5 million people who can't get work. At this session, we're looking at one place where the problem might reside. We're very, very privileged today, and honoured really, to have Professor Alison Fuller, I think everybody knows her, who's recently published a review of vocational education for the government, a review which has been widely commentated upon, discussed, and all of whose recommendations have been accepted by the government. Alison is going to introduce this for 10 minutes, so this format is slightly different to other discussions, after which I've got 4 people on the panel who will respond to some of the points Alison has made. I'll introduce the others in the order of their response. After they have had their response, and perhaps give Alison some time to come back on the responses, I've got a couple of questions to ask of the panel, and then we'll throw it open to you, questions, points. Just to introduce Alison more formally, she's Sir Roy Griffiths Professor of Public Sector Management at King's College London. She's written several books, some of which are Does Education Matter? And more lately, recommend all of you to read it, Diminished Returns, How Raising the School Leaving Age Will Harm Young People and the Economy, something the government is planning to do. David Guile, who recently has been made a professor on my far right, so congratulations.
Thank you very much.
He's at the Faculty of Policy and Society, Institute of Education. David specialises in professional, workplace and vocational learning. He's participated in several research projects on behalf of ESRC and European Union. He's currently looking at internship in the finance industry. He's also on several editorial boards, including for the Journal of Education and Work. His book, The Learning Challenge of the Knowledge Economy, was published last year. Next in line is Alison Fuller, who's also a Professor of Education and Work and Head of Lifelong and Work-Related Learning Research Centre at the University of Southampton. Alison has sat on several government committees, including being a specialist advisor to House of Commons Department for Innovation, Universities, Science and Skills Select Committee's scrutiny of the Apprenticeship Bill. Her most recent books include Rethinking Widening Participation in Higher Education and Improving Working as Learning, a book she co-authored with other people. Next, to my immediate left, I can never do that, Joe Lopez, who's from Jaguar. Now Jaguar is one of our sponsors, and the other sponsors are THE and Come and Shall. I'm just thinking of Southampton, that's probably the previous session. But anyway, Joe is a chartered engineer and is the head of technical excellence at Jaguar Land Rover. Joe is one of those people who's moved up the career ladder at Jaguar, joining as a graduate, working in different technical roles, including vehicle handling and steering. Joe today has responsibility for development of engineering skills and competencies within the company. He works closely with the universities and represents Jaguar Land Rover and the automotive industry at cross-sector working groups of the Coventry and Warwickshire local enterprise, and it's a group that involves the CBI and many others. Last but not least is Dennis Hayes, who's Professor of Education at the University of Derby and Visiting Professor at Oxford Brookes University. He was awarded a National Teaching Fellowship in 2010. Dennis is a member of the editorial board of the Times Higher Education magazine and is the founder of the campaign group Academics for Academic Freedom. So if you give a clap, So, Alison.
This seems to be on, so does that mean people can do me if I talk at this level, or do I need to project it? Right. Okay, well, I've been asked to talk about skills, and I'm actually going to start by saying that I think this is only to a small extent a skills problem. I actually think it's much more a labour market problem than a skills problem that young people face. And I will come back to skills in a minute, because as I said, I have just managed to come up with 28 recommendations on the subject, so I obviously had something to say. And actually, I'm delighted that the government accepted all of them in principle and is actually implementing some of them quite fast. But I want to start by saying that I actually think that although making sure that all young people have skills, and I would say also in education, I need to get as strong as line for skills actually. One of the problems that we have had over the last 20 years is a conviction that you could sort the labour market and sort out young people's futures with what economists call a supply-side approach. Skill them up and they'll go and get jobs. And if they don't get skills and they don't get jobs, well, that's all their own fault, isn't it? I think that's an extremely partial view. I think the fact that we have spent so much time chasing qualification targets and training targets has been an almost uniformly bad thing in many ways, partly because the minute you put targets in, which is what successive governments have done, you lower quality, and I'm happy to take questions on that later. I don't want to spend ages on it, but think Russia, think tractors. But also because it has distracted attention from what's happened in the labour market, especially in the UK. And essentially, and this was something which I have become increasingly aware of, this was a country in which it was, not so long ago, easy for young people to leave school and get jobs. Now, that maybe that many of them would have done better to stay, but the point was they could, they did, and getting labour market experience is an incredibly important thing to do for your future life and future career. It's just as important as anything that you are likely to be learning between 16 and 18, to be honest. And it used to be very easy, it used to also be very easy for people to come back into education after they decided this wasn't right for them. And it's now become incredibly difficult for any 16 or 17-year-old who has had enough of education to get a decent job. Now, to a certain extent, that has been deliberate government policy. In fact, quite a large extent, it's been deliberate government policy. But it's been deliberate government policy because of this conviction that if people stayed in education and got their qualifications, the labour market would open itself up to them. And this has proven not to be the case because, in fact, for a variety of other reasons, we've also got a labour market in which there are enormous numbers of increasing barriers to young people in terms of what employers are willing to do and their willingness to take it on. And I want just very briefly to sort of underline one fact, which is why I think it's, there is, I get very upset at the idea that, you can't get a job, it's just because you didn't get enough qualifications. If you look at the employment prospects of somebody with a given level of qualifications, first with A levels, level 3, whatever, they are just enormously much more likely to be able to get a job in the southeast and the east than somebody with exactly the same qualifications in any other part of the country. So, it's not just about skills, and if it were just about skills, we wouldn't have what are, unfortunately, wide gaps between our regions. The other thing which is related to this, and where I actually think we do have a major problem, is the relationship with apprenticeships. And this is where I think the whole issue of what sort of skills people want becomes, it's a combination of labour market issues and government skill issues. If you ask most people, you go out on the street on Kensington Broad and ask most people what they think of an apprenticeship, they think of some sort of 16, 17, 18-year-old being looked after by a mentor and learning craft skills and the rest of it. Well, that used to be the case, and as recently as the 1960s, and Alison's probably better in these exact figures than I am, but as recently as the 1960s, the majority of boys leaving school at 15 or 16 went into an apprenticeship. I mean, it's not that long ago. And as recently as you know, the sort of the turn of the century, the majority of apprenticeships were taken by 16 to 18-year-olds. And what has been happening since then is that so-called apprenticeships have become less and less in many cases like this description. I mean, I accept those who wrote them. But the proportion of apprenticeships that's like that has been decreasing. And the number that have been going to young people has been decreasing. And I don't know whether any of you read Polly Toynbee's article in yesterday's Guardian, or read the Guardian on Friday, or read the Telegraph on Saturday. But if you go to any of those places, and you can actually, in many cases, follow a link to an admirable little publication called Every Week, they have been doing some very hard analysis of figures and also breaking some of the stories. And essentially what has happened is that by now, more than a third of all apprenticeships in this country go to people who are more than 25. We've had a huge increase in notional apprenticeships. The number has almost doubled in the last year. 7% of the new places have gone to 16 to 18-year-olds. Only 16% of the new places have gone to 16 to 24-year-olds. So we have essentially had a government policy of creating vast numbers of apprenticeships, most of which go to people over 25. Not most yet, but it's actually more than a third now go to people over 25. But all the growth is to people over 25, where an increasing proportion are actually going to people who are already employed. These are not new jobs. These are apprenticeships which involve turning an existing employee into a notional apprentice in order to badge them. And the reason that we have done this is twofold. It's partly, as I said, because we have targets. Apprenticeship was one of the only two areas in the current comprehensive spending round that was given a substantial increase in hard cash, the one being overseas aid. It was then accompanied by targets, which we know from the past are very bad news. So that's one of the things driving it. The other thing driving it has been this continued belief that if you somehow just skill people up, this will, by sticking qualifications on them, this will do something to the labour market. And I think we are now comprehensively seeing that this is not the case. If you look at the figures, and then when you goes to my report, there are all sorts of figures all over it, but you will see that the apprenticeship, if you look at what's happened to 16 to 17-year-olds, they are going in and out of education, in many cases simply because they cannot get a job. If you look at 18 to 24-year-olds, you see a steady secular increase in the unemployment rate for that age group, and we therefore have a serious labour market problem. Two quick things about the skilling. The thing that I said very, very strongly in my report, which I hold to as much as when I wrote it, is that what we do know is that to do well in life, both because of the intrinsic demands of the job market and because of the way employers make their selection decisions, it is even more important than it used to be that young people have a really good level of English and maths. Because that continues to pay dividends right through your life, and you can prove this. It's not just the qualification, it's actually the skill level. So it's not just the badge. And so one of the things that I strongly recommend is we take this much, much more seriously. The other thing, which I think, the other two things I think we have to do is we have to sort out the apprenticeship situation. And what I've also said very strongly is that in the meantime, we have to make it easier for young people to get jobs. I mean, if they can't be jobs, then at least work experience. Something has got to be done to increase the number of 16 to 18-year-olds who have genuine experience of the real workplace, and increase the number of 18 to 23-year-olds. And sorting out apprenticeship, and there's a short-term move, sorting out access to jobs, that English and maths are, in my view, infinitely more important than constantly redefining specific vocational qualifications. That said, I did recommend, and I'm delighted that the government is actually doing something about this, that more be done about the quality of vocational qualifications in education. And I don't want to go into a long, sad story of equivalences and retailing points at this point. But in terms of the incentives that government has been giving to education institutions, these have been deeply perverse. They've had strong incentive to fob kids off with qualifications which have absolutely no labour market value at all. I think that the people who put through these policies should slink away in shame and never lift their heads again, but I don't suppose they will. And I do want to say thank you to Michael Gove for doing that one fast.
Thank you.
Okay, right, well, hello everybody, and thank you very much, Karen, for the invitation to reply to Alison. I actually agree with Alison Wolf, and I would say Alison Wolf, Alison Fuller, both of them. So, it really is important to look at vocational qualifications in relation to the labour market. And I also think that most of the recommendations in her report, provided they're implemented, will actually make it easier for future generations of young people to move into the labour market. The issue I want to pick up particularly is the issue about work experience, which Alison makes a very strong case, and I hope the government will move on this. Compulsory work experience or mandatory work experience should move from the pre to the post-16 curriculum. It was wholly appropriate 20 odd years ago for work experience to be in the pre-16 curriculum. In light of the issues of staying on, even with the qualifications that Alison's just raised, we actually need a comprehensive offer of work experience post-16 if we're to help people more effectively either find their direction or start to develop skills. And I shall come back to that point a little bit later when we use the theme of work throughout. Having said that, I'm actually less sure that the recommendations in Alison's report will immediately help the current generation. In all fairness, the remit of the Wolf report was for the future, not for the actual immediate circumstances we're facing. So the point I'm making is I accept totally what Alison says. I think there's an additional challenge that needs to be addressed at the present time. And I would actually present that, I think, using the language Alison used herself, but just to put out some slightly different angles around it. That's the issue between demand and supply. And I'd start first of all on the demand side and say that I think the government is going to have to develop a policy for growth beyond Plan A. It's got to encourage innovation and entrepreneurship in the UK private sector. I think it's going to have to support infrastructure development in the public sector. Because without actual jobs, vocational courses will do, all they're going to do is just offer young people false hope. Having said that, I think we've got to be realistic and recognise that jobs will be a mix of permanent, part-time, contract-based, and even freelance employment. The broader concept of a job and getting into the labour market, and I think policymakers are inclined to do. That means, as I see it, that there's a new challenge for vocational programmes, irrespective of their level. Apart from developing skills, I think they have to help young people develop social capital. Now that's the network of contacts that will help them find their way in the labour market. And I can give you examples of research that we've done on that for people who are interested. In case of the supply side measures, research undertaken by the centre that Alison Fuller and I work at, although with different universities, we work at a common ESRC funded centre, reveals that the content and the process of vocational programmes is important as actually the type of qualification. So we, over the last few years, have several examples of projects designed by employers, educational training providers, and interested parties such as local councils to re-include socially excluded youth or to diversify the occupational profile of an industry into both permanent and contract-based jobs. What we can see from those is what's really important is that vocational skills have to be developed in actual work context, not in simulated context, because by and large employers do not accept the simulated concept as an evidence of skill formation, and I think it actually very misleading to young people to try and make the training low. But in particular, this is where funding issues. What's also required is not just the specialist input, but actually pastoral input. Because if you've been unemployed and you're being re-included, there's often support that you need in order to help you. And funding for post-16 courses, especially when you're looking to reintegrate people, is often a threadbare with respect to that element of the vocational offer. So my conclusion is we need more bespoke programs, i.e. ones that do relate to regions, because I completely agree with Alison's observation about the set of very different problems for responding to people who are unemployed. Finally, because I'm looking at internships at the moment in finance and creative culture, and I acknowledge internships are very controversial for all kinds of reasons. But when they work, and this is what the graduates have said to me and my researchers, they do the following three things. They develop skills that could not be developed within a degree, because the key skills within a degree, in a sense, are not actually work in the main, unless they're on a vocational programme, they're not work-related. They help find a direction in the labour market, and they help people develop social capital connections, Because if you're moving from contract-based employment to contract-based employment, you need to know how to do that, and that's not something that can be taught in the same kind of way as actually go to Marks and Spencer's to find an advertised job. And therefore, there's a kind of a career development angle too. So, when they work, what internships offer is graduates, is a bespoke form of vocational learning, which actually helps them move forward. They have, of course, got a terribly mixed track record, and there's rightful condemnation of all kinds of internship practices. Nevertheless, I think they do raise a question for the government, and that is, can internships, not as they currently operate in this area, but in the worst case ways, in the better case ways, can they actually be part of a policy of skill development? Because as Alison's acknowledging, we need a range of ways to actually support young people to get into work. And it seems to me if we've got something that's working, even though it may be problematic, we may want to actually think hard about how to improve it, rather than actually sort of jettison that particular approach. So thanks ever so much for the opportunity to say some of those things, Alison.
Alison.
Thanks very much, Cara. And thanks, Alison, for the introduction. Like David, and I think like a lot of researchers in our community working on vocational education and education work transitions, we welcomed a lot of what in the report, and it said a lot of things very powerfully that needed to be said, particularly around low-level vocational qualifications. So I want to comment briefly on a couple of areas and develop Alison's comments in particular on apprenticeship, which is my kind of specialist subject in the session. But first of all, I wanted to say that a little bit about opportunities for jobs that might be a part of the growth solution that everybody keeps talking about. The politicians and commentators at the moment are talking as one about the need to grow the economy and also to rebalance it, and in particular to reverse the decline in manufacturing and engineering. But it's not so clear where they think the skilled jobs are going to come from, and a lot of our data is retrospective always. I think that the growth can primarily come from IT, computing and creative sectors, and there's some evidence obviously in statistics that backs that up. But there are also areas where we know that there are skill shortages, but when we look at the supply side we see huge problems. So for example, in the latest apprenticeship statistics that were released on Thursday, of 443,000 starts, only 200 were in IT software and web development. Only 250, I'm rounding to the nearest 10, were in creative and digital media. I'll come on in a minute to say where they were. I think there's a huge opportunity for us to be far more on the supply side to encouraging the development of those skills, and I know that there's an industrialist who's campaigning for changes in the curriculum around IT, which at the moment is shameful because it doesn't have any computer programming in it at all up until Key Stage 4. It's all about IT simply being a user function, how to use Microsoft projects. So we are creating the kind of pool of young people with basic creative computing and technical skills that we can then build on to help us develop and innovate to produce new jobs. So apprenticeship's never out of the news these days, and this week's been a big news week for apprenticeship yet again. It's certainly a very powerful model of learning, and that's kind of where I come from in terms of researching apprenticeship, and it's stood the test of time, and we see it being used across the economy and in such a wide range of occupations and professions, including the highest status vocations we can all imagine, like surgeons and so on. So apprenticeship is a really powerful model of learning, but in recent years it's been used as a lever of government policy and been asked to do very many things which are often competing. So for example, to help tackle youth disaffection and underachievement, at the same time to produce highly skilled and productive workers, as an alternative to higher education, but also a scheme for certifying adults' existing skills. So we need to confront really what's going on in that policy area and really challenge the government to start thinking differently about apprenticeship and not to just concentrate on the numbers. We've had an increase from 200,000 to 400,000 over the last year in terms of starts across the economy, but that's skewed very, very heavily towards certain sectors. And I think some of you may be surprised to know that a third of all starts are in 3 sectors. Can anybody guess what the top sector is, the top 10? I keep a rolling top 10 going in my
Retail?
Close.
Catering?
Customer service.
Yeah.
Now, customer service, how does that resonate with the public perception of what apprenticeship might be? There's another one which might surprise you, which is in the top 10 and going up the chart very fast, and that's management. Where do you think construction now comes? It's not in the top 10 anymore, it's number 11. And plumbing and electrical work are way down. So you can see that there are some big issues there. About 6% of 16 to 18-year-olds only start an apprenticeship in this country, compared to getting on for a half in a country like Germany. Just to pick up on Alison, in fact, we've never had a big apprenticeship sector. I mean, even in its heyday, it was only just over 20%. But that was because, as Alison said, people could walk into jobs without qualifications. So there are long-standing concerns about a quest for producing a high-quality, consistently high-quality apprenticeship. Oh, just one more statistic I'd like you to have a go at guessing. One of my favourites. How many people over the age of 60 do you think started an apprenticeship this year? Over 60. Over 60. Anyone?
A couple of thousand.
3,910. So apprenticeship is being asked to do a lot of things. However, we know from our research, and particularly research I've done over many years now with Lorna Unwin, that there are a range of quality issues around this. The conversion issue, as Alison knows, is one that we've raised over many issues. That's where people in existing jobs are converted into becoming apprentices in order to have their skills accredited, what they already know. The level of apprenticeships is a problem. The vast majority, I should say, perhaps not the vast majority, 2/3 plus, are at level 2, which isn't the level that's normally associated with skilled work. The intensity is an issue. Many of these apprenticeships only last a few weeks or months, and they only require, and this is now statutory, 100 hours of training provision that's away from the workstation. So that's 2 hours a week essentially, which compares to 1 and usually 2 days in many of our European department countries. So there's a variety of apprenticeship practice in this country, and some of it is fantastic, and I think you'll probably hear from Jaguar Land Rover the examples of that, where we know how to do it. But there's a huge capacity gap in terms of making sure that goes across the economy. And one of the concepts I'd like to see reclaimed, although maybe we need to change the terminology of it, is the concept of time serving. That concept had such a bad name in the 1980s. It was seen to be all about restricted practice and so on, and some even more insulting kind of terminology and went with that. But actually, the best apprenticeships, when you look at them, are about a process of maturation over time, where there's real skills to be learned, there's a kind of general educative process as well as the socialisation process that's going on. And it matters what happens in the workplace in order to sort that out in terms of what kind of structures there are to support the ability of young people to develop those skills. And we can't just leapfrog that process.
Okay, thank you. Joe.
Thank you very much, Pat. This one here. As the employer in this panel, the academic, I want to sort of look at a bit relate to what's it's like on the greater spectrum as far as skills are concerned. I share Alison's earlier view that the term skills is somewhat difficult. We're talking more about education, learning, that sort of thing, rather than the word skill. As an advanced manufacturing business, clearly we look at a lot of skills, but I want to concentrate, if I may, on engineering. And I think I want to pick up a few points on both graduates and on apprentices that have just been talked about. Now, we see the whole area of engineering as challenging. There are 2 specific challenges: the quantity of engineers being put out in the system in the UK and the type of engineering. Jaguar Land Rover is a large business, frankly has not great difficulty in attracting the number of applications. For instance, we've just taken on 330 36 graduates and 104 apprentices, and I'll talk about more apprentices in a second, but of the 336, 260 are engineers, so my focus on engineering here in particular. But the fact is that the numbers of engineers coming out of the UK is far lower than our competitors, and the problem we have particularly is that impacts on our supply base, on the smaller SEMs around the country who cannot either offer the opportunities that we do as a larger business or struggle to actually attract those graduates. I was at a summit on Friday, in fact, the Engineering Council, and the discussions there were about that some of the behaviours of graduates, for instance, is to apply to the first employer, and if they don't get it well, they give up and go somewhere and do something completely different, and you don't follow the engineering route. But the lack of skilled engineers at both graduate and apprentice level is a significant barrier to growth in advanced manufacturing. Our apprentices spend 4 years in development, and take up Alison's point, we recognise specifically there is clear definition has to be held between what an apprentice really is, in our opinion, which is the individual that goes through a number of years of detailed training, learning, education, whatever it is, rather than short, sharp, straight education that might be down to how to assemble a component or something like that. That's not really how we term apprentices. But going back to the graduate point, and just put it in context, in India, every year, 750,000 graduates come out of university with engineering skills. Now, there are less than 600,000 professional engineers in the UK. Although we're not going to compete with the sort of quantity there is some significant issues to resolve there to ensure that we have enough engineers to supply the demand in advanced engineering. And we talk now about the relevance of engineering coming out of degree. Now, it's interesting, the statistics that Alison just put out about computing, for instance. The automotive industry, in particular, is growing at a phenomenal rate in very specific technology areas. And those areas, not surprising, look at electronics, electrical and software skills, the same skills that we know are lacking now in the UK. There are fewer graduates coming out of universities, and fewer college courses that are supporting that. And that's a real struggle for us, because there are areas there that we actually need specific skills and specific expertise. And that, again, does not only affect us, but it affects the wider economy. An example I like to use is to just for people to conceptualise automotive industry. I think recognise aerospace is a very sophisticated industry. If we talk software, for example, a latest airliner will have 6.5 million lines of code within its avionics systems, and that's something like a Dreamliner, something that's just coming out into the market. Now, a luxury automobile has 100 million lines of code, and you need that level of skills required to manage that sort of complexity in the automotive industry.
Somebody's going to it. Let's carry on.
Okay, let's carry on. So, going back to the point, insufficient numbers are coming out with STEM skills, so science, technology, engineering and maths. The school system is producing fewer school children going out to stage 3, stage 4, following those particular subjects. So English and maths, absolutely. From our perspective, more physicists coming out as well. And we need to understand that what government levers can report.
We just hang on a second, then just sorry to hear.
Okay. So looking at prioritising, what prioritisation can happen? Prioritisation for funding, for example, for graduates and for schooling, for those particular subjects. But then again, the industry needs to address the whole aspect of engineering as a profession.
Sorry, step right back here, please. Okay, sorry about that. It happens, what can I say? We'll now go to finish. Anyway, there's not much time.
Right, I'll try to remember what I meant. So, we talked about engineering disciplines, the fact that it's important to focus on the right engineering for advanced manufacturing. We have, in the UK, I guess, interestingly, a long history of engineering. Most of that's been related back to the 19th century. If any of you have ever been to the Institute of Mechanical Engineers at Knowledge Education, it always drives me mad going in there because there's always steam engines and lots of stuff from Stephenson. All fantastic, but it's all 19th century, not 21st century. Game engineering. So, the fact is, engineering has moved on, the type of skills have moved on, the fact that we need government support to encourage STEM as a subject to fulfill in school. I was just saying, just as having a chat outside, the fact that school children in the UK have to make decisions at 14 which branch to go in. If they decide not to pursue physics, they're not engineers. You know, and that's really early. We have to therefore, as industry, engage very early on with school children for them to engage in engineering, to understand what opportunities there are in that, and in particular to engage with women and women engineering, because 8% in the UK. I was quoted a few months ago in Autocar for saying that it was a disgrace that there was 88% women in engineering, and it was great, to be honest, because you had 60 blogs of folk who just talk about horsepower and prettiness and stuff, all talking about women in engineering, which is brilliant. But anyway, I'll digress slightly. So, we need for governments to use new people under their control to support STEM and advanced manufacturing. And whilst we as a company might have partnership centres where we bring school children in, we've engaged about 13,000 children this year in showing them around, showing them engineering within the company, ensuring that we understand we have the right equity and the rights of apprenticeships. But we need new imaginative ways of engaging with students of all ages into engineering and use the communication tools that they understand now. So to conclude, JLR and industry in general needs action to engage with students, to engage on STEM, to engage with them on engineering. It's not about oily rags and spanners. To support the importance of the skill and area that's required for engineering, but also to go to that talent pool that's required for not only large businesses but small businesses, and ensure that the right technologies are followed through in the courses and the universities deliver.
Dennis.
Well, my proposition is going to be we should do away with all skills training. Every single bit of it. Because it's not about skills. I have to say, if you read academic literature, most of it agonises over what does skill mean. There's a great motto entitled, I can't believe it's a skill. People do know what skill means, and often you get lists of what skills mean. And I think something did change. It's about the labour market, but not in the way that Alison said. The change came about in 1979 with the Further Education Unit published a document called A Basis for Choice. I wouldn't recommend you read it, it's like done on a bando. But that document did two things. It brought about a focus not on training for jobs, because of problems in the labour market, but looking at the sort of people you had to create, the characters you had to create, to fulfil those jobs in the future. So it was like pre-employment skills, pre-vocational education became the focus. And gradually you saw two things happening. One, there was a split. Once you do that, the sort of training that you think is training, Joe is like a foil for us, because in the back of your mind you think that's what training is. Most of the training is not about that at all. At all. It's about you. It became about competencies, changing behaviour in a behavioural way. Then it became about changing the internal souls of the people who are on those courses. That happened along with the fact that anybody could then do this training. We didn't need specialists, because all these cowboys had ripped off FE colleges during the 90s. The years of the locusts, it's called in the literature. And all this could happen because it's pointless activity. It keeps people very, very busy, as you say, until you're 24. Right? And people were saying in 1979 that 4 million people unemployed would be a revolution. But they're all sold at pub. And often it was vocationally related training pub. Let me just give you an example. There's a report in the I've just got any old list of skills. What are skills? This is my list of the top 10 skills, called from several different places. Communication skills, teamwork, integrity, confidence, character, planning skills, literacy and skills, analysis and decision-making skills. Right? So, are they skills? And the reports have shown that employers actually don't look for technical skills. They look for soft skills, what used to be called emotional skills, or aesthetic. And there is some jobs, obviously, in McDonald's, if you'll say, have a nice day all day long, you have to have a certain sort of skill. But the list that they gave of what skills employers look for, if I'm honest, is employability, interpersonal skills, willingness to work, appearance, motivation, flexibility, behaviour, confidence, and positive gestures and mannerisms. I don't know if you want to show me a few. Positive gestures and mannerisms. This is the rubbish that passes for skill training. And it seems to me at every level, from the lowest level courses right up to the MBA. It's all this sort of stuff. And it's a waste of time. But what it does do is a very good social function. I mean, a lot of these things are about changing patterns of behaviour. So, and actually getting people to behave in different ways. And get people to be a lot happier. I mean, I would say this one, it's a sort of therapeutic activity. It's like apprenticeships for people over 60 is a waste of time. You know, they should be lounging down on sofas or go to villas in Spain, not playing in B&Q, right? Which is what it's disgraceful that they're forced to do this, but they feel good about it. They're all meant to feel good about themselves. So people doing all these courses are meant to say feel good, they feel they're being better for work, but they're not. It's a real bug. I read an article in a French newspaper, which roughly translated is "I'm too clever to be a baker." And it was a whinge from the jilted generation who've been on all these courses for years and years and still couldn't get a job, or couldn't find a job, or they found the jobs were too demeaning for them. That's because half the activities they do on those courses, it's that saying that Francis Thomas, much more vocationally relevant, are just time-wasting activities to make you feel good about yourself. Gathering portfolios about these sort of skills is not the sort of thing we traditionally think of as skills. Generally, I don't want people who've got the right positive gestures and mannerisms. And you can have the wrong mannerisms to be a really good engineer. So I think I would just get rid of all this training. And I think when you've sold training courses, as we all do, every minute of the day. And I always example when I saw the cook at my old university going on her certificate in management studies course. She needs to go on a cookery course. But she wasn't allowed to do that, but she could do this thing that obviously made her feel good about herself, made her feel being good about the organisation, but totally useless. But what has happened is that this has happened not largely because of economic reasons. We all know, we borrow a lot of money to keep the system going without any reference to productive activity. And the point that seems to me, and I don't know if Alison would come back in it, when I read her report, what it doesn't do is really identify the economically productive parts of the British economy and work backwards, rather than identifying the needs of skills and training. But I think that's the most crucial thing. Once you know what's going to be economically productive, then you can possibly have some sort of training. But as you say, it's too complicated for the state to do it. But I think that is where you have to start with what's productive, not what sort of skills programs we can give to people to get them more involved. Certainly, against the social networks. If you live on the Isle of Thanet, right, what's your social network? Right? If you live in Oxford, you have to know a few dons and you can have a social network. You can't if you live on the Isle of Thanet. I know living in Derby now, I know your social networks are limited.
Okay?
Yes, sorry.
Now, if we, Alison, would you like to just pick up on any of these points?
I'm not sure I would really.
Okay.
I hear from people in the
Okay, great.
Well, actually, I'm allowed to come back on one thing. And the last thing I want to do is have government decide which there is productive parts of the economy. I think we'll just we'll go to different.
I've got one question that I want to throw open. I won't have two, but given what happened, let's just stick with one and I'll throw it out open. One of the things when I read all the material, and certainly having recruited lots of people at my workplace, one of the things I'm very keen perhaps for all of you to comment on is what exactly is this vocational education all about? Because I read Alison Fuller's article on hybrid, education and skills training, vocational, presented as, parts of your education should be vocational education. It did make me think in confusing or incorporating skills training and everything else, which I must admit, coming from an old school, I always thought it's at work where you got most of your skills, and that's where you got on-the-job or off-the-job training. I wasn't quite sure, confusing training skills with education, that we're really not doing a good service to either. You're not really having a really good education, treating it on its own terms, nor are you really grooming somebody to be able to be employed with the right skills and everything else. So perhaps, is there an argument saying to keep it separate? Training, skills, workplace, education. Just a quick comment, anything.
Okay, well, can I stick with education? Because that's actually what I was asked to talk about.
Sure.
And for me, education, just for ease of nomenclature, is something that goes on in an educational institution. Obviously, it isn't just there. But let's take, for the moment, the subset of education that goes on in an educational institution. And so I suppose the question is, should anything go on there that isn't a mainstream academic subject? Or should you simply have core academic subjects in schools right up to the age of 18 and nothing else? I think that would be a pity. Because, in a sense, there are lots of different contexts in which you can develop quite general skills. I think the idea that schools are places in which you can learn highly specific skills that will take you into your job tomorrow is a mistake, and to the degree that is peddled, that it's not a good idea. And one of the interesting things about countries that have strong apprenticeship systems is that they actually don't do very much of what we would think of as sort of school-based vocational education. They tend to have actually quite general schools, and then you go to the... But I don't actually think there's anything wrong with having a range of contexts in which you learn things. I mean, the obvious thing in this country, for example, would be the BTEC diplomas, which I actually think are, at any given time they may be better or worse depending on which institutions are doing them or how they're doing them. But it doesn't seem to me, and I'll show my this point so we can descend upon me, it doesn't seem to me to be intrinsically more stupid to study the business environment, to study how business is developing, or to study design, than it does to study geography. I mean, this is part of our world, and it's actually about being clear that you don't get job ready in a school.
No, you don't. Anybody else wants to comment on that?
Yeah, very quickly. I'd like to put focus on higher education, because 3 degrees that I can think of that have been in universities for years, architecture, engineering and medicine, are basically vocational degrees.
Yeah.
So we cannot talk about education separate from training, but they are inextricably intertwined with one another. It's a false argument. The argument is, what is the educational component of any program, and what is the skill development of any program? Because I do disagree profoundly with quite a lot of what Ellis said about actually dispensing the skill development. Because quite clearly architects do develop skills in their placements, which they then take back into the university, write assignments around, and then go back into the workplace and move forward and so forth. So I think what we have to do is recognise that the tricky issue, which is where Alison's report was called for, is actually the 14 to 19. This is the area which is so hard, and the UK has kind of struggled with it for kind of donkey's years now to try and get that bit right. We have much more success at the HE level, and I accept that we have a lot of success with the BTECs, but it's the broader general vocational provision, what you call it GMVQs for the diplomas, that of course is so many problems.
Okay.
Well, I'm in favour of proper liberal education for as long as possible until 18. I don't think we should vocationalise that aspect of education at all, because it's always that sort of kid, right, the vocational kid who gets the vocational training. I was said to be one of those vocational kids. I agree, but I wasn't. And the thing is, you're denying all kids the right to education once you start with this, so you can have a bit of practical activity. No matter how successful those programs are, the real problem at the moment is to give every kid the right to a general education, a broadly knowledge education. That's a real problem. And it's false to say things about architecture and these courses, because they're highly academic courses. And if you take being trained to be adopted, you could argue it's just a skills-based thing. But it goes on for longer, and it's really academic and rigorous, right? And that's not what the normal programs are like. And there are 1 or 2 exceptions, and 1 or 2 that BTECs are useful. But why can't people, as long as possible, get a really good education and then choose?
Just very quickly, the best example of a general vocational education that I've come across is from Austria. And there, quite a large portion of the cohort will go into full-time vocational education from 15 to 19. And at the end of it, will be qualified to enter higher education, but also will be very likely to get a job in a skilled labour market. And one of the things you notice is that they have about 50% of the curriculum is a general education, and then the rest is divided between work-related and work placements. But the course takes 5 years compared to 4 years at the gymnasium, so they recognise it takes longer. And the other thing, which we try and fit everything into 2 years, the other thing is the intensity. Those young people are there for 30 plus hours a week. Our full-time definition is 16 hours a week.
Okay. Right, guys. Hands up. Standing, can't see very well. The lady, yes?
I think this is just an observation, and I find this very depressing. As a head of sixth form in a school where usually about 73% of my students want to go on to university, obviously this year it's going to be very different because of the fees situation. So quite a few of them are reticent about this and are asking me about the apprentice system. Having heard what you said, you know, I find that very, very depressing. So will I continue to talk about apprenticeship, or will I do what I want to do, which is to continue to tell them that university is worth it?
Okay.
I suppose it's maybe a comment or a question, I'm not sure. I find at one level the discussion quite confusing, and I wonder whether part of this is that we're running together maybe two separate issues, one of which is how do we build adults? You know, how do adults relate to young people? And how do we build the economy? And I wonder whether we need to separate out those two questions, because they tend to become intermeshed. And I'd be interested to know what speakers think is, what's new in both of those spheres? What's new about the relationship between adults and young people? And what's qualitatively new about the demands of the economy? Maybe we can separate those two things out, maybe then work out how they fit together.
Yep, sorry.
I just have a couple of questions. The first question is to do with the discrepancies in regional unemployment we have now, and if the panel thought that was due to sort of a lack of upward social mobility as outlined, I think, the government initiatives in order to improve social mobility. And my second is more of a point, actually, as a gap year intern working within management consultancy, paid intern. I disagree with the fact that a school education does not prepare you for a job, and that the graduates that I'm working alongside with do not seem to be much prepared from the skills level, since a lot of the skills that are learned in their degree aren't relevant for the job description. That their skills that are gained from their degree sort of equip them any better than me as a school leaver for the job in question.
Interesting.
Yes, I have to run an educational charity. Sorry, I have to run an educational charity. We work in a very, very low deprived area of London. And one of the things we do is we provide English language classes for which people have to pay a very, very small amount, but they have to pay. And I'm struck by the people who come to us. They come from all over the world. They don't necessarily come from very educated backgrounds. They have no trouble getting jobs and using those jobs as rungs on a ladder on which to climb. They're not having skills training or vocational training or anything like that. They just come as they come. There are various age groups and there's no problem. So what is the problem with what you might call very broadly the employability of our young people?
Okay, very useful question, I think.
Well, there's two prongs. One is in planning. I think the accent seems to be more on the economy than the individual or the education. That's how it's coming across. You're all more concerned with building business skills as opposed to educating young people. And that kind of worries me a little bit, because you're looking at data, and you mentioned data that was, I can't remember the word, the English word, which kind of before, retrospective. We're reacting to present economic woes, but we don't know what the future in terms of production and business may bring. So there's a challenge there in how we even think about these kind of skills we may need. But also I'm thinking of the individual. I taught in further education for 15 years, and I taught on these vocational, the BTECs, the vocational program, the GMVQs. And the interesting thing always was, whatever the government wanted, or the policy, or whoever designed the programs, the way the students use the programs is different. And I'm interested in Alison Fuller's point, in that actually my students would do the program, some of them wanted to get jobs, and it was early years, they mostly wanted to get jobs, nursery nurses, but they knew they could cash them in the future to go further. And all the whole health and social care, were essentially those from minority groups, whether working class whites, Afro-Caribbeans to start with, African immigrants later, who knew that they wanted to progress academically, could not go the academic route, but actually were kind of using the program. So I think the way the students are going to react to it is not in the equation, has not come into the equation.
Okay. One more here, and then I'll come back to the panel. We're going to extend, we're going to extend the session, so don't worry, you'll all get in.
I was struck by Dennis's comments about the therapeutic role of the skills discussion. And I've, in a very small way, delivered generic business skills in secondary school, and then thoroughly hated myself afterwards because it was completed as a waste of their time when they could have been getting on learning something useful. But it struck me that actually it's a form of therapy for business, where business is invited into schools, because it seems to, there's now the box ticking when it comes to corporate social responsibility, but that whole discussion suggests that there's a lack of belief in the fact that making things and making money is sufficient, and that in this way, bringing something back is a form of therapy for business.
Okay.
Right, well, there's so many sort of important issues raised that I can't, I'm not going to take all 6 in particular. I mean, a couple very quickly. I mean, an apprenticeship is worth it if they can get a really good one. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, if they can get a Jaguar Land Rover apprenticeship, go for it. But the answer is it depends, just as it depends for the university course whether it's worth taking out the loan or not. And the loan is on quite good terms, by the way. The issue of sort of is this about how we build the economy? I mean, I think ultimately the question that we were asked, which is what should be done about the current generation who are facing these terrible unemployment rates, that is primarily about the income. And of course, it is harder today than it was in the days when our economy was not really growing, but the shape of it was changing. It was a long period in which the number of middle-class jobs was increasing and the number of low-skilled jobs was decreasing, and upward social mobility was easy to deliver. And that's not the case anymore. That creates a whole new set of challenges for people. You can't just mandate that there should be upward social mobility very easily. You certainly can't mandate that it should occur the way it used to, which was, everybody could go up and nobody needed to come down. That's difficult. But I think there is a sort of a point that I do want to make again, which is that schools can do what schools can do. And actually also to a large extent universities. And it's unrealistic to expect them to do things which are done much better in the workplace. There are skills that you learn by being at work, which you cannot teach effectively in an education institution. And it's really important to accept that. And governments the world over have this habit of demanding of education that they do things that it does things it can't do. Education can train you in some things which are highly relevant to the workplace, and it can also stretch your mind and make you into a more interested and interesting person. But it's not about specific job training. I mean, it's just not very well suited to it. And what I tried to do, going back to what I was asked to do, is to sort of say, above all what we need to do for 14 to 19-year-olds is to give them general skills, because those do have immediate job relevance in one sense, and if you want to be able to learn things. But they're also about equipping you for life as well as for tomorrow's job. And we don't know what the future will bring, of course we don't, which again comes back to this point. I mean, as far as the question of, why do people from abroad come and get jobs? Well, there are a variety of things, but you're not actually usually comparing like with like. I mean, people who come here as highly educated
They're
adults.
not. No, the people I'm talking about are not highly
Educated.
educated.
Well, but they're in London.
They're going to basic
Okay, but they're in London. I mean, to be honest, you can get a job in London if you're prepared to, but it's also true that this is the point at which employers do make judgments about whether you're adult or you're motivated. And if you are a 16-year-old in an ex-mining village in Durham, you cannot get a job.
Well, I think one of the ironies of all time was Wilson College in there's now Wolverhampton, they changed the name, wrote a book called How FE Can Save the Economy, just before it spiralled into £6 million worth of financial irregularities, which has never been resolved. She should change the name, so perhaps the conclusion was that she should change the name of Britain to Wolverhampton. But there's always been this, there's been a deliberate adoption by by schools and universities of an instrumental remit. They feel they can solve the problems of the economy. They've abandoned this, but it was until recently it was very hard to get anyone to defend education for its own sake. And when you say, listen, schools should do what they do, you mean they should educate, because schools have ceased doing that, and they're involved in solving every social problem, and that's the real issue, I think.
Yeah.
You want to address the problem. So just saying it's an educational problem, an individual problem, is a way of solving. It makes things a lot better because you've got with educating people. I think that would be one way forward. And you have to say that when you talk about schools for the future, I got a quote from Andrew Fisher, who's head of Shazam. But he said, speaking quite recently, he said the main problem we have is that to get young people to absorb skills that don't exist yet. Absorb skills that don't exist yet. Now, this is lauded as a great, profound statement. But if that's the remit that we're going to have in education institutions, we're never going to get anywhere. So I don't think you can solve the future, but at least you can educate.
Just on the CSR therapy and CSR, which I think is very issue. Sure, I think there is therapy in there, but not for the business. I think for the individual, I've seen this happening where direct engagement with schools and businesses has happened, and I'm talking businesses from a very general specific extent. So where our engineers, if I can put it that way, contextualise what's being learnt at school. Not in going back to the vocational element here, this is what I term partly vocational. This is exchange of ideas between industry and schools, and how what happens in schools relate to industry. So from a CSR perspective, we've got the social responsibility. Yes, there is a lot of therapy. Therapy is very positive therapy for both sides, and I think it helps. It helps us engage with the students, and for the students to understand where their options lay.
There was one question I thought was particularly interesting about how we can develop relationships between adults and education. I think that is a really big question at the moment. And one of the unhelpful things I think that's happened in the whole discourse around the role of education and the role of vocational preparation is the idea that education can produce what's sometimes called oven-ready young people, which of course it can't. And I think when you go to the workplace and look what happens in the workplace and look at how young people and adults are relating, and actually you see that where the workplace learning environment allows them to come together to try and pursue shared goals, and there's a shared understanding of what the goals are, then those relationships can actually be very, very productive. And you do see the maturation of the young person occurring. But it does take time. And adults, where they see that their business is going to be benefited by having a new generation of workers come through and those skills are needed, are prepared to spend the time. But there aren't enough places like that. There's too much of an expectation that young people won't need that kind of help. And indeed that the adults aren't there don't have responsibility to provide it, and I think that's a great shame. You do a disservice by having too high expectations of what the education system can do versus the workplace itself.
Yeah, the question I'd like to pick up was the one that said about how do you build adults and how do you build the economy. Is there anything new in the relationship? Just to take two quick examples on building adults, because we've referred to them historically, they've been around for years, and obviously you can build an adult through a straight education provision to higher education, or through the apprenticeship route, and both are different ways of building adults. So I think we have to operate with the fact that there's many different ways you can form adults, and you don't just see one as being superior to the other. How do you build the economy? Well, that kind of depends whether it's a new economy. One of the nice examples from Joe is that actually in an economy that we know, an industry like we know, automobile, there's a whole new set of skill requirements, knowledge and skill requirements, because there is a bit of conflation in the policy discourse between the knowledge and the skill, by the way, but I'm sure people are aware of that. But so that raises new challenges, as he was indicating, about how does a company then start to articulate that new need to the education sector, but also to parents and young people. I, at the moment, doing some work for pharmacy, and many of the young people that I've interviewed who've gone into pharmacy actually have a very fixed idea of the role of the pharmacist, which they effectively see as dispensing medicine. But the pharmacist's role is nothing like that these days. So there's a complete mismatch. Okay. So how do they now develop a new understanding of the fact that many pharmacists actually require to work in the community? Many pharmacists want to work in the community because they actually always see themselves as having more knowledge and skill than they actually been allowed in the old role to actually use. So there's very complex issues about how when there's both a profession wants to broaden its remit and at the same time maybe being required to broaden its remit. So how do you actually look at what's new in that relationship? How do you actually pull that out? So I'm raising this with you just to show that these are critical questions. You know, we haven't all got all the answers, but I think if we don't take some case study evidence of what's happening in particular professions and share it, then we won't be able to plan forward.
Okay, Alice, yes.
I just want to pick up on a whole area of education which is sometimes called vocational education, which has been alluded to, which is the BTEC. I had a long history of working and researching around BTEC. There's a lot of romance talked about what it does in the curriculum, and I think there's a recognition of what BTECs, in terms of their content, their teaching and their assessment, have actually become. And yet, as we've heard, if only 6% of young people who aren't doing the academic track are in BTECs, pretty much in different forms. And what we can see in BTEC, we've just done a very big project for EdXL, which is the awarding body for BTECs, about the state of knowledge and skills. There's neither knowledge or real skills in BTEC. Very few of them, unless they're done in the workplace, have any workplace experience at all. I would echo some of what Dennis said about the emphasis on pseudo skills, learning to learn, reflection, self-awareness, emotional literacy and employability. But the big skill that they're learning, and I've seen this coming now over the last 15 years or so, is assessment has become a skill. The teaching, the assessment and the learning are all one. The students are given repeated coaching to the criteria, repeated assessments to get them through the qualification. And in the project we've just done, what we saw across a range of BTEC nationals, and this is 16 to 19, is assessment is sold as a life skill. The ability to reflect on your own work and to be coached to the criteria is seen as a skill ready for appraisal and performance review in the workplace. So I think Dennis is really right to question what skills are being taught, but I think the problem with the debate so far is we're focusing on apprenticeships, which are really important, and not what is called vocational education, but is neither vocational nor education.
Okay, Ansel? Yep.
I'd just like to raise the issue of entrepreneurship. While it's good to raise up and actually be employed, it's even better to raise up and be an employer. And I feel that we spend our time educating our new generations to become kind of passive. Find someone who will like them and take them in and give them something to do. While it would be so much better if that same generation could raise up and go into society and see, this is something we can do here, this is something we can do there. Nobody's employing me, but I can find some capital, I can use my connections, and I can build something here, and I can employ other people. And to push that and to encourage that, I think would be a very good competition.
Thanks. I just want to pursue the theme that a few people have raised about the problems with the concept of vocational education. I'm partly informed in my role as an employer. Just to preface 2 points of agreement, I agree that the problem of unemployment or the lack of employment opportunities has got very little to do with employability. It's primarily the fact that my company, Jaguar, Shell, many other companies aren't creating enough new jobs, so it's an economic problem, so I agree with that point. Secondly, I'm a great fan of apprenticeships. My business is an operation in Germany, and I can see what the apprenticeship system works properly there. I'm sure it's a bit mythologized, but it does work very, very well there. So I'm in favour of apprenticeships. But vocational education I've got a big problem with, because as an employer, what I'm looking for is not, and maybe, I hope this isn't a surprise, I'm not really looking for specific hard skills. I'm in the telecoms industry. The skill set that I need, and my company needs, changes every 6, 12, 18 months, right? And I don't want to employ people for 1 or 2 years, because it's a big hassle employing, it takes a lot of time, a lot of cost. You want to employ people who will be able to develop with the needs of your business. And so what I'm looking for, and this may fall into your category, Dennis, of one of your sort of 10 things, but I think they're real. What I'm looking for is not a specific hard skill, but primarily ambition, which may fall into your motivation thing, and a capacity to learn. Those are the things I'm looking for. And the difficulties I have in terms of employing people and spending months and months isn't because there's a skills shortage or a training shortage of theirs. I think it is an education shortage. And I think in that sense, I don't quite agree, and maybe it was shorthand, Alison, but saying that education, a good, traditional, knowledge-based education, you said doesn't prepare people for jobs. I think it does. I think it's the best possible.
It doesn't prepare them precisely for tomorrow's jobs.
Well, I think it prepares them for today's, yesterday's, and tomorrow's jobs. Because in terms of an education that teaches you to think, to question, to judge, to gain knowledge, those are what express themselves in ambition, which is about thinking and questioning and wanting to do better. Those are what express themselves in a capacity to learn. It's learning to learn. And so it's a shortage of good education, which is what making it so difficult for me to recruit people at the moment, because you go through scores and scores of people to get somebody who has got those skills. And the point is, I think, and I don't think it's like looking back to halcyon days, but over the last 15, 20 years of employing people, I find it increasingly difficult to find those people with those capabilities. And I think that isn't a problem of what's happened to the quality or quantity of vocational education, but it's what happens to the quality of schooling. And it's the decline in schooling which means it's so difficult. And so, to conclude, I think the problem with vocational education for me is that it does blur the distinction between on-the-job apprenticeship type training and good academic knowledge-based education. And whether it's intentional or unintentional, to push more and more of schooling into adopting practical vocational subjects is actually encouraging a move away from the sort of education which is what we need for employability.
Okay, right. Person in the middle here.
Just a quick thought. I think that sort of pertaining that to the show, because that's sort of Wolverhampton is my hometown, so I know about that college. Would you tell me more? And since Professor Hall started off saying something about, recent governments have all encouraged people to stay on in education a lot longer. I'm just writing out some thoughts in my shit. And then we've got sort of tuition fees in, and governments have to deter people from going on. So I'll ask the panel what they think about tuition fees, and maybe in a sense if it is going to stop people carrying on with their education. That's maybe not a bad thing in the sense if there aren't the professional jobs out there that are going to meet then be required, and maybe that's not a bad thing. I was in here yesterday afternoon for another lecture about are people tuning in on the welfare state who make it too easy. I don't know, are people too qualified for the lower graded jobs that perhaps don't need any great academic qualifications? I agree with the gentleman there that perhaps it's the right type of education that's perhaps if you was in this economy we've got too many people out of work and you still can't find the right suitable candidates to take on. That's an issue. The technical director there isn't finding sufficient engineering graduates coming forward, and I mean that hints that the education isn't accurate. So just throw that out as a thought, really, and yes, it is perhaps a society when people are are lazy, and we're having, as they said, many more people coming from abroad to take on, say, the lower paid jobs or the plumbing jobs, those sorts of things. And, what are these 2 million people unemployed doing that they aren't doing these jobs in this country that exist? So, and that's something that we need to look at.
Okay. Final comment, and then take the speakers, and I'll come back to the lady at the back.
I didn't quite agree with that last comment, because I don't see any reason why my plumber shouldn't have a degree in ancient Greek. I don't mind him being all skilled, as long as he can plumb as well. I also agree with Phil, and I agree with our school leader here, because I recruit people in the financial services industry, both for routine office jobs and for fairly highly skilled technical jobs. Now, many of those people want to go off and do a degree in ancient Greek or any kind of proper academic study where they're engaging properly in academic disciplines, then that's great. And we employ them, we employ lots of people like that. If they're going to go away and do 3 years doing a management business services degree, then I'd much rather have them in workplace where I can pay them a bit less when they first start off. I can teach them all the skills they need. As long as they've got maths and English, I can teach them any skills that they need. And they've not wasted 3 years of their life doing something that's a huge waste of time to everybody. So to the extent that people aren't going to be doing degrees like that, then I don't mourn that at all. Just finally, one other thing to throw into the mix. My belief is that work experience is a monumental waste of time. Certainly pre-16, I think actually post-16 a bit as well. It's a waste of time for employers. We spend huge amounts of time telling people to go away. It's a waste of time for students. A friend of mine's son has just spent a week folding boxes and pizza huts. That's his work experience. Proper placements, good. Work experience, a huge waste of everybody's time. Let's just get into it.
Oh, where we are.
Okay, right. Can I just say thank you for that, because one of the recommendations I've made is to get rid of this mandatory work-related learning key stage 4. I think it's a total waste of time. I've had more slack on that than on any other thing that I recommended. And I'm totally wedded to my original position, because I also think it's sending somebody out for a week to do nothing worth doing somewhere that we've probably spent ages trying to get somebody to take on. It's a waste. It's not really a waste of their time. It's actually a waste of serious resources that we use elsewhere. So thank you very much. I'm not going to again answer but just a couple of things. And I think I'm going to have to start being a bit brutal here about education systems. Education systems sort. That's what they do. They put people in some sort of order that the rest of the world then uses. And if you have everybody in education from 16 to 18, you basically have a choice. You either have a differentiated curriculum, or you have one which basically follows the lowest common denominator of what everyone can do. Now, actually, nobody has gone for the latter. Systems where at least half the cohort goes into work or work-based learning, genuinely work-based learning, apprenticeship, they tend to have, for obvious reasons, because they've got half the cohort left in full-time schooling, a less differentiated curriculum than those which would, for example, include Sweden, where they have no apprenticeships left at all, they find them out, or French or ourselves, where you've got a large part of the cohort still in education. And then the question is it better to make it vary to a degree, or is it better just still to have exactly the same, completely basic, general education, academic education, and simply have different levels of it? That's a debate one can have, but I think it's important to realise that one reason that the BTEC route emerged is that it's for people who actually didn't like or weren't very good at A-levels. Now that doesn't mean they're necessarily stupid, but it does mean that they don't like academic subjects the way that they are taught in our schools. So you have to have a differentiated curriculum if you're going to keep the whole cohort in, because the alternative is you wipe proper physics and proper chemistry out of the school system completely. On the actual BTECs, in fact, if you want to go onto the website of the DFE, there's a new set of requirements for anything that's going to count for 14 to 16 league tables, which will actually affect BTECs most of all, and then have a knock-on effect for 16 and 18.
and they are going to have external assessment, they're going to have synoptic assessment, there is actually going to be quite a lot of change. But I do think you also have to accept that when you look at the returns to something other than A-levels, people who do stay in education, who do get a BTEC diploma, particularly if they get a distinction or a merit, they are able to go on into higher education, and they do earn more than people who don't have it. And while I'm sure, in fact I know that there has been a lot of examples where the current BTEC provision has fallen away and places which I think should be changed, the reality is that BTEC has in fact been a very successful route for many young people, and it has given them a route on, and it has given them something which they can build on to, and which they've got clear financial returns from. So I think it's really important to understand that. And you know, if you want very demanding academic education for 16 to 18-year-olds, you also have to offer an alternative to people who don't want or can't do demanding pure science, demanding maths, and highly academic programs. And I think I'll leave the rest of it to other people.
A plug for Dave Coates' open access sixth form physics school in East London, which is going to do exactly the opposite of what you say. Everybody can enter it without any previous qualification, no criteria. And he believes you can teach all children. Right? And if, you know, if you give a go, and if you fail, but right across the world, people have lost that initiative. One of the reasons, and it came out. I remember Jim Callahan in 1976, desperate to think that he could have any impact on the world, started the great debate on education, which involved business, telling educators what they should do. I think that's a real mistake. Well, I was going to say this until Phil spoke. Business has got no business telling educators what they should do. That's part of the problem. Because Joe says what you want, good physics, good maths, good STEM subjects, right? Good education. When Phil says, that's slightly ironically in contradiction to me, it's a good education, of course, that gives you ambition and capacity. Learning to learn, by the way, is an endless, infinite regress of struggling and worrying about learning. It's not quite what you use it. So I think keep business out of education. Let educators say what education should be. That's the first step. But this, I won't start telling you how to run, how to say Rolls Royce, I mean, too doggy folks. You'd be outraged. And, don't tell me what I should be doing in university.
Well, what do you think of
Well,
that?
I think Phil's right. I think there's absolute education is key to all of this. You know, from a very parochial perspective from engineering, you've got building blocks that you need for engineering, whether you need, that's for engineering or for medicine or for the prerequisites within the system. I disagree with Dennis completely about engaging industry with education. I think it's absolutely important that, for example, that universities are having engagement with industry both ways, because we have to understand in their respect what the talk criteria are. But I'm fed up, to be honest, of the number of engineering degrees out there that are completely wrong in what they teach. And it's only industry that goes into those that actually tells them what's actually in the industry. They don't understand engineering, they don't understand modern engineering, they don't understand advanced manufacturing engineering. So you've got to tell them, and you've got to tell them, you can tell them in the nicest possible way, working. But we work with a whole load of universities, and having correct engagement with universities across the country is absolutely key. There are too many of them, frankly, and in the sense that how many universities out there are actually focusing on delivering the right actions and the right criteria. They can't all be as good as each other, they're not, clearly. No. So I went to Wolverhampton University, another Wolverhampton will look fantastic. But you know, ultimately there are strengths and weaknesses everywhere, and we should look at the strengths and focus on those strengths, and industry will help in academia understand that.
Okay. I agree with Joe. I think the evidence from the research is that the highest quality vocational programs, be they at post-16 or post-18 or up in higher education, are the ones that do find a happy combination of general education and vocational knowledge and practice, and that creating that kind of divide between the two, particularly post-16 level, is very unhelpful. And really this is an opportunity to benefit from what employers can tell educators and curriculum designers about what's the current skills are and what's required. And also in terms of providing opportunities to have contact with the latest equipment and practices, which in the best will in the world are very unlikely to be in the education system, are likely to be in the workplace. So I think that the goal for the best vocational education and training is actually a bringing together of general education and vocations and specialist vocational knowledge and skills. And when we look at the best practice, around the world, that's what we see. And I think we'd be putting our heads in the sand if we think that we can somehow create general education work, and that somehow people are going to be able to transfer across that divide without having to have a process to bring them up to speed in the actual labour market that they find themselves in.
Yeah, I agree with the things that have just been said. I think the issue that I'd like to kind of return to, though, is that one of the focus for this discussion is actually not people who are in the system, and most of the comments from the audience and from the panel have actually focused about how we can redesign programs for people who are going to go through the system. We have a heck of a lot of people who are out of the system, who are 16, 18, 20 term, and they will need support. And that's why I was making earlier on an argument, a very strong argument, that they will need more bespoke forms of vocational education, or academic education, if you want to call it that, or the academic vocational blend, however, whatever terms you need, to help them move forward. And then I also argue quite strongly that we need employer partnerships. So for the employers who are here today, it's great that you actually are interested in both coming to events like this, but hopefully in your local areas, you will support whoever agencies are actually trying to help that section of the cohort, who will be the biggest jilted generation, because they are currently unemployed. And therefore, we must recognise we've got that kind of focus. What Alison Fuller's report has done is how to suggest how to rebalance vocational education for the long term, or the medium to long term. But the short term issue, I think, is quite pressing, and I think it does need some other kind of interventions.
Okay, I'm going to take, some of you have your hands up, so I'm going to take your quick points, and then Alison actually has to leave. Alison will leave just before 3:30, but if you're really quick, we can probably finish them.
I'll pick up on what you were saying about sorting students, and that's the primary aim of school. I'd like to, as an educationalist, I'd like to say that is not my prime aim, that I'm trying to work with students, and therefore I don't want to use that as a way of how I actually organise education. I think lots of what you were talking about 16 to 19 bracket, and actually some of the differences that arise is from the 14 to 16, where students have to do BTEC science, which doesn't enable them to do A-level physics when they get to the age of 16, because they're not allowed to enter that course. So I really, I think what is the aim should really stand for what we're actually trying to do. And that goes back to clarification on what vocational education is. I think often you kind of go back to Europe and you look at some of the models of apprenticeship, models of vocational education in Eastern Europe, in Western Europe, away from UK. And then yet, we try to still do in our schools, do everything under the same roof. And I think you need different resources to provide really good vocational education. And that is vocational education that's based on knowledge, but that's got the resources that goes with it.
Okay. Person in the back there, very quick, yeah?
I'm not sure about employees in universities, but I certainly think employees should stay away from schools. And it comes back to, for me, because they don't know what schools are, they don't know what education is. I think that's part of the wider problem, because most people don't know what schools are, and most society doesn't know education is. I've just started working in the East London school, and the kids have learned very quickly that what's expected of them is to pass exams, and they know how to pass exams. And so they learn the process of how to pass exams down pat, and they work really hard. I mean, they come back after school, they come to preschool clubs, they come at break time, they work really, really hard at it. And the one lesson they've learned is how you pass exams is really important. Content is what you use to pass exams. The process matters, content actually means you've got something to do the process with. And so kids are just learning how to pass exams, what the process is. And that's partly, I think, because society more broadly views education as a way of training children into jobs rather than just educating them.
Okay. Last comment. I'm sorry, Larry.
Yes, it's just this fact that Alison said you have to do something that the 16 to 18-year-olds don't want to, who are not interested in academic education. And well, I mean, basically, those sort of people ought to be out getting a job if they're not interested.
Indeed they should.
Yes, but the thing is, I mean, you know, the problem we have is the economy isn't growing and there's no jobs, and the whole concept of this kind of lifelong learning or trying to find things to occupy people is because of that, really. And so, you know, what we're sort of like arguing is that's dumbing down the education that we should be giving to people who do want an academic education. And I think, you know, that's what we're sort of arguing, we shouldn't mix the two.
Okay. I'm really sorry. I'm going to take, and then I'm sorry, I'm going to have to okay, very quickly. I didn't say that's what you as a teacher were doing any more than it's what I as a teacher am doing. I'm saying what the school system does as it sorts of people. When I ask people how they decided to come to King's, one of the things they do, I'm sorry, is they go on the web and they look at where we stand in the league tables. And although they hope they'll get a good education when they get there as well, what they actually want is they want to have a degree from a place that will be recognised by top employers. And the reason they want to get a 2-1 when they get there is not in some cases it may be because they want to stretch their minds and be really sort of, you know, educated human beings, but it's also because they feel that there are a lot of jobs where if they don't get a 2-1, they'll just go straight into the reject pile. And if that's not sorting, I don't know what it is. I mean, it's not how I teach. I try to teach for everybody, as you do, but it's a reality about what education systems do. And I think and this also comes back to the last point about the fact that you have kids who are stuck in education and they would rather be in work. And that doesn't mean that they shouldn't come back later. And often people who are 16 are actually very interested in academic education later, just not when they're 16. I think we have messed things up terribly, and to a degree we are just trying to find ways of keeping people occupied, which is why I get so cross about what's happening to our apprenticeship spending. And I don't have any simple answers to it. I think that we have to address that problem, not just by the school curriculum, but by addressing the problems in the labour market. It's not just macroeconomic demand, it's obstacles to taking on young people, it's the fact that we're wasting this money on badging 60-year-olds instead of developing apprenticeship places. And I also agree with David that we have to do something, you know, really urgently in advance for sorting things out. You know, there are things you can do. I mean, I tried to identify a couple of things one could do, and you know, English and maths are really important, and proper work placements are really important. But I also think that we all over the world are in a situation where the labour market is harder and harder for young people for a whole variety of reasons. And to some degree, what we're trying to do in 16 to 18 education is put plasters over a problem which is not really to do with education. I'm really sorry.
Can we give that?
Very interesting. Thank you. Receptive comments and questions. We might as well have you 1 minute.
Just one last point. The obsession with the influence of employers is things like the 2-1, which gives you great inflation across universities that are clearly facts. And it is just not true. I mean, I still stick to my position. I'm digging a big hole for myself. Keep employers out, except in very rare circumstances, because they've influenced the whole of higher education to make it much more instrumental. Universities now think of tick boxes of characters they can produce, the typical graduate, entrepreneurial, and all these things. They don't go from business more widely. So it isn't just the specialist areas where you may have some evidence. It's when employers start telling us how to teach. That's the sort of thing, what you should be doing, what sort of characters you should be using. That's the general impact. It's not just in the specific scientific interest. And I think that is a disaster for higher education.
Yeah. Right. So we needed two minutes. I agree to extent that, as just made, the point is that employers are about the outcomes, the
educational element, that has to be the experts dealing with that. You know, we're after the outcomes, be it the subject, in our particular case, the engineering subject, and so forth, the content. I wouldn't propose that industry would go in and say, well, you're not teaching that right, that's ridiculous. But nevertheless, there is certainly, you know, the points made on entrepreneurial, all these qualities are looked for by employers because it's normal. You know, employers will look at some of those qualities, look how that translates. I don't believe there's ways of teaching it. I think that's the point that the individuals picked up those skills whilst they've gone through the education system. And when we see them, when we have a day-long assessment centre with those individuals, that comes out. And I think that's the important thing. I think we're looking for the rounded individual in our particular with specific skills, because we're not going to teach them the basic skills to get in there. But we certainly would expect them to interact and do everything normal as part of their character.
Just to return to apprenticeship really for the last time, but I think one of the issues is how do we create more high quality apprenticeships? We've got instances around the country where it's been done really, really well. How do we ensure that capacity is shared and used to help bring that good practice into other employers? So at the moment there are lots of employers who just don't know how to do apprenticeship. They're clueless. And we have no system at the moment for sharing or enabling what's known about how to deliver it to be shared. What we do is we outsource the apprenticeship to the private training provider sector, or indeed to colleges as well. Tell employers, this won't hurt at all, you won't have to do a thing, you don't actually have to even know it's going on, we'll do it all for you. And until we actually get the employers involved and tooled up, then we have the problem with the high quality apprenticeships.
David,
yeah, I'm very clear. I don't agree with Dennis that employers shouldn't be in university. I do agree with him that universities should not capitulate in the way he described. Okay, that's a sign of weakness within the university sector, but it's been compounded by successive governments, Labour and Conservative on coalition, who've funded universities to produce those kinds of outcomes and talk to parents about those kinds of outcomes. And that's wholly unrealistic in the way that everybody's recognised today. So the issue is, if you look at the strongest HE systems in the world, Germany and America and ourselves and others, there's always been and there always will be some kind of relationship between HE and employment. The issue is not keeping it separate, it's about on what criteria, with what values you have that relationship. So that you can say, this is too much, this is not. And if we don't get that right, we'll be here in 10 years' time.
Okay, thank you very much.